Hello everyone, welcome to this week's Sticky Notes. Every other Friday at 12:30 we share something about product strategy, design or research. It's only 15 minutes and you can watch along on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube and LinkedIn, so you can watch over your lunch break. This week I am talking about deceptive patterns. And as we said before, this is just a little taster, and I definitely encourage you to do some further digging into this one because it's very interesting. So what is it? It's always good to start with that. I can guarantee, even though you may not know what it is, everyone in this room and those watching have experienced a deceptive pattern many, many times. UX design is no stranger to using behavioral science to guide a user into a certain direction or to achieve a certain task. But usually that is to the benefit of the user and the business and product. And that's where deceptive patterns differ. So, in the words of Stan Lee, with great power comes great responsibility. So although you can use your knowledge of behavioral science for good, like I hope we do, you can also use it for evil. So I read a lot of different definitions of deceptive patterns, but this is how I would sum it up. So a deceptive pattern is when a product or service has been designed to manipulate a user into performing actions that are against their best interest. Some of the definitions that I looked at included the phrase purposely designed. But actually, I don't think that covers the instances where they kind of occur naturally just because it's been badly designed. But however, sadly, most of the time they have been purposely designed in this way. And it's to benefit the business and product and not the user. There are many different deceptive patterns out there, but one that I'm sure most of us have experienced, it's so common in fact that it has a fun name, and that is the Roach Motel pattern. So this is where it's designed to be very easy to get into a situation, but very difficult to get out of it. The most common example being getting a subscription and then cancelling that subscription. So there are a lot of different strategies that people use when they're designing a deceptive pattern. But for the Roach Motel specifically, it essentially uses behavioral science to create barriers for the user so that they can't leave. There are a lot of companies that I could have looked at for examples of this. Obviously, there'll be big ones like Amazon, which is no surprise that they're using deceptive patterns. But I thought I'd maybe look at maybe one that you hadn't heard of and a slightly smaller company. So this is Beer 52. They are a beer subscription service. So you can get monthly craft beers sent to your door. And they have a very lucrative offer to start with, which is only $4.95 postage and packaging, and they send you 8 craft beers, which is a very good deal. And that is part of the Roach Motel pattern, is they have a very sort of good introductory offer that lures you in. But before I go any further, I will say Beer 52 have fought their reputation, as most companies would, that they use deceptive patterns at all. But if you look at their social media or any kind of like reviews, you can see that their users are suffering from the Roach Motel pattern, and it is quite obvious. So let's take a look at a few of the barriers that they put in place. So they make you phone to cancel. This is quite a common one that a lot of companies use. And I appreciate that it may not sound like a big deal to some people, but I think everyone knows that millennials especially hate phoning up to speak to someone and will avoid it at all costs. And they know that. It's also quite a time-consuming action potentially, because you don't know how long you're going to be on hold for. You don't know if they're going to try and sell you other stuff. And their phone lines are open Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, which means if you've realized on a Saturday that the subscription is going to renew tomorrow, you're kind of out of luck. And although their introductory offer is only $4.95, it goes up to £27 a month, which can be a lot of money to some people. They also, interestingly, claim that you can manage your account completely online, but apparently that doesn't include cancelling the subscription. Another tactic that they use is misdirection. So they try and misdirect the user from their intended task of cancelling. In this example, you can see that when a user goes to cancel, they try and tempt them to stay, and they provide an option for pausing for 1 month or sending a beer every 2 months, which in itself is not a crime. That's probably something that we might do as UX designers. But when it's combined with a very inconvenient cancelling process, that's when it becomes a deceptive pattern. Because realistically, how many of us would choose the pause and deal with it later option rather than phoning to cancel? The answer is probably a lot of us is going to choose the deal with it later option. And they know that, and they're using that against their users. And it also helps them because it's keeping you tied into that subscription for a little bit longer, hoping that you might forget to cancel next time or pause. And it just looks good for their numbers in terms of how many active subscriptions they have. Another thing that they use is they try to prey on the financial anxiety of the user. So you can see at the bottom of the page, there's a massive red warning sort of sign that, of course, is going to draw your eye. And when you look to the right, it says that you will lose £12.10. And that already kind of puts people on edge. And when you read a little bit further, it's actually just the credit that they have for to spend in their shop. So it's not actually £12.10 of your own money, but people are very adverse to losing things. That's something that we know as a common behavioral science, is that people are risk averse. So they are preying on that knowledge that people are very precious about money and losing things. So the way they framed it preys on that. And all of these things combined create a really bitter taste for users, and they can have a lasting impact on the users' opinions of the company. So other than being potentially an evil company, why would companies use deceptive patterns? A lot of it comes down to the business focus on quantitative data for measuring the success of a design piece. So in the example of Beer 52, if they looked at how successful their design of the cancellation process is, they would see it as quite successful because not many people are leaving. And that is the problem with deceptive patterns, is they're very good at performing well when you look at numbers. But they are doing it by tricking and trapping people. And that is not only a less ethical way of designing things, it's also a very narrow-minded view on the success of a design, as it doesn't take into account all the people that are leaving because they are frustrated by it. Or in the case of Beer 52, the damage it does to the brand and their trust rating. So I just pulled these from various social medias, Trustpilot, Reddit, Twitter, and you can see that people's opinions of Beer 52 are that it's cruel, that it's sort of just scam, trickery, and it's just really difficult to see them as a legitimate company, even if they are one. So I guess it comes down to what can we do about this? I think with most things, it comes down to educating ourselves first, but also then talking to friends, family, about the most common deceptive patterns. It's much like when a new text scam or email scam goes around. Sharing your knowledge about what to do, how to spot it, just means they're less likely to fall for it. And that's what we need to do with deceptive patterns. So in the case of the Roach Motel pattern, my recommendation would be, before subscribing to anything, just Google how to cancel it. And if you see the search results have anything to do with users complaining how difficult it is to get out of it, just don't bother. But we also need to educate businesses on how to better measure the success of why it's so important to have users' opinions and their thoughts and feelings as a part of that measurement. And the UX author Nir Eyal proposed this great idea of the regret test. And this is where we take a moment in our design process to ask if the user knew everything involved in the process, would they still go ahead with their intended task? So in the example of Beer 52, if they knew all the steps of the cancellation process, would they still subscribe? And that's quite an easy way to sort of gauge whether you are falling into a deceptive pattern. But realistically, the best way to find out is to put it in front of users and ask them. Lastly, I just wanted to highlight Harry Bricknell, who is the cognitive scientist who coined the term dark patterns. He has listed 11 other patterns, including the Roach Motel, which means there are a lot of ways that companies and businesses are tricking and trapping users at the moment, which is why it's so important that we are educating ourselves consistently about the latest ways that companies are deceiving users. He also runs a Twitter account, which I recommend following, because he tweets and retweets any deceptive patterns that people find on their journeys across the internet. So you can see the wonders of this example here, which really frustrates me. And that is where Starbucks have combined the promotions and order status notifications into one, which means that if a user wants an update on when their coffee is ready, they also have to put up with the promotions of Starbucks. And they're not related at all. It shouldn't be done like that, but it is forcing users to not have a choice in that matter. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about deceptive patterns and how they work. I've got links to podcasts and websites and articles that I used while I was sort of digging through this topic. It's definitely an interesting one, and I think we should all educate ourselves. And yeah, in 2 weeks, we've got another Sticky Notes talk, so I hope you can be there.